Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Fighter Pilot's Guide to Living. This is our 4th episode. It's also our 4th installment with retired Rear Admiral Frederick Bad Fred Lewis. And today we're picking up after the Gulf of Sidra incident, but we're not necessarily going chronologically this time around. In fact, Bad Fred has been talking a lot in this episode about some of his favorite moments flying, and they involve so many different platforms because Bad Fred has flown an incredible array of aircraft. Today's episode ends in 1986 when Bad Fred worked on inaugurating the Super CAG program. He talks about what that was, why it was important, and why it was difficult to be at the helm of such a huge change in the U.S. Navy, because obviously large systems tend to push back on big changes. So this is a great episode. I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, I'm going to let Bad Fred take it away. I feel like this would be a great time to talk about those really memorable moments in your flying career. And it doesn't have to be the Tomcat. It could be the F-4 too, because when we were talking about this before we started recording, you said that your favorite jets to fly, because you've flown so many different platforms, were, I'll let you tell it, but were, the ones we've talked about so far.
I had the great good fortune to be able to have my hands on a whole bunch of different airplanes and be allowed to fly a lot. And I took full advantage of that. And I was also just very lucky to have survived and also very lucky not to have ever had to eject. I never had a major mishap. I had a major accident occur while I was flying. I'm not sure what caused that. Luck's a lot to do with it. Prayers, I think, are probably part of that too. But also being in the right place at the right time is also part of that. And maybe even there's a little element of skill in there too. Who knows? Maybe I was good enough pilot to avoid some of those things that could have turned out disastrously. So anyway, you asked about my most exhilarating moments flying.
Yeah, what are the moments of your flying? When you think back, what are the moments that you think back to of really high energy or high, where you felt that you were the happiest, in the air, like those kinds of moments? Can you tell me some of those stories?
Well, yes, a couple that come to mind almost immediately, and then no priority, no list of prioritized things. Just a couple things that pop in my mind because I think these are things I'll never forget. One of which was not in any order of no chronological order here either. So I remember one incident that comes to mind was as I finished up my first CAG tour as CAG 8 as a commander. We were in this is after the Gulf of Sidra business, so when I was getting ready to detach from CAG 8 and hand it over to another officer. We were at sea, and I was very close to getting my 1,000th carrier arrested landing. So I knew I only knew a few, but needed a few more to get there. And I wasn't trying to hog flight time or anything, and so I didn't, actively pursue it myself. But the admiral aboard the ship was a guy named Jim Service, a fine man. He was our flight officer aboard. And the captain was Captain Jack Bassler, another, as I mentioned before, great guy. So the two of them decided that they found out that somebody had told them that I was just shy of getting my 1,000th carrier arrested landing. And the two of them said, okay, we're just going to steam here for a while, keep it into the wind, keep the ship into the wind. We're going to let Bad Fred just run the deck. And I was flying an A7 that day. Not a Tomcat, I was flying an A7 that particular day. The A7 is a pretty good airplane at the back end of the boat. I like flying the A7, single seat. And so I came back to the mission that we had done, and I landed, and they said, they taxied me over close to the island, gave me some fuel. I said, what's going on? I said, your signal is to launch, stay in the pattern. We're going to give you some landing. I said, what? Just stay in the pattern, get as many landings as we can get for you that day. So I did. I stayed in the airplane, taxied up the cat, banged off, turned downwind, came back and landed, taxied up the cat, bang off, turned downwind, and landed. And I did that 6 or 7 times to get the number of traps that I needed to get my 1,000th carrier rest of the day. And that wasn't me doing that. That was a gift really from Jim Service and Jack Bassler to me. A salute to me, my being the Air Wing commander on that ship. That was a real thrill getting my 1,000th trap. That was quite, exhilarating for me personally. Anyway, yeah, another one I remember very distinctly, and it did involve the Tomcat and the F4 fan as well, and the F5, F5E, yeah. So I can't remember. I think I was Fighter Wing 1 at the time. Maybe I was Tech Wing, the Air Wing. Anyway, it's a more senior officer, and I was qualified in all three of those airplanes. So we're down at Key West in the Air Combat Maneuvering Detachment doing training down there, and I decided I wanted to fly all three of those airplanes in the same day in the dogfighting scenario. So to fly the F4, the F-14, and the F5 in the same day, 3 different sorties, 3 different backseaters, in an air combat maneuvering dogfighting mission, training mission, was really a thrill. So, I mean, it's just fantastic. When I conclude that, I don't know of anyone else who's done that before. So it probably wasn't very smart and definitely highly illegal today, but at the time, it wasn't, anything that called me out. Good sense would say, no, don't do that, but I did it anyway. So,
To me, it sounds smart, right? To be able to, if you can fly it well against an adversary, then you know what a well-prepared adversary is going to do for you. Why do you think, well, why is it not allowed today to do that?
well, you're only supposed to be qualified in 1 airplane, I think. I think that's the rule. Maybe 2 at the max. The PAX River, I think, is the test pilots, so they're flying different airplanes all the time. And I think their max is 2. Max, they can be NATO's called in at the same time. Anyway, so I did it that day, and it was really a wonderful thrill, something, a milestone that I don't think anybody else will do. So, there are other things that occur to me that have happened over time, stand out, but there's so many of them, it's hard to pick another one.
You need to go with as many as you want.
Well, let me think here. Those were the ones that I really thought were really good. My first flight in the Tomcat was a thrill. My first flight in the Phantom was a thrill. That was something that I clearly remember. Briefing the flight with a pilot, another pilot in the back seat. He had no controls back there. The pilot was a friend of mine, family man in the Phantom, taking off out of Miramar, and the departure procedure was distinctly different than it is today. I mean, a very noisy pavement related today. How you depart, when you take off, and how you depart the pattern, you go out in the warning area. At that time, finally, you got airborne. You turned about 10 or 20 degrees starboard, and you climbed to 500 feet and had to stay at 500 feet, which is below the commercial airline traffic that was going up and down the coast of California. It had to stay below that. 500 feet and accelerate to 450 knots. And 450 knots, and you're screaming at that altitude, 450 knots, and then once your feet wet, once you're over the beach and out of the water, then you're clear to climb. But you climb at 450 knots until you intercept 0.9 Mach, and you climb at 0.9 Mach. No other airplane that I've flown before that had that kind of capability. So just the raw power that I felt for the very first time, it just absolutely blew me away. And when I landed, I was 10 feet tall, painted purple. Thanks so much.
Were you glad then that you had not decided to be, a surface warfare officer or a submarine?
Absolutely correct. I said, boy, what was I thinking?
That's so funny. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had a pilot tell me that that was not their first thing that they wanted to do. And so it's so interesting to me that that wasn't really your first choice, but obviously you
Yeah. So
excel at it and love it. So
I
it's
found my
neat to see that you found there, you know, you found it, even if it wasn't what you thought at first. Um, I'd love to hear more, or if you want, because I know that with time things hit. So
yeah.
if something hits down the line too, we can add it whenever because
We've been okay. Let's see. We got a few more minutes, I guess. Uh, another back in my days as a flight instructor in the T-28, uh, trying to accumulate enough time to be. I think I may have talked about that. I talked about this before, about being an instructor of the month. Talk about any of that? Okay. Well, that was Surgrad or Plowback. You know, we were fresh caught right out of the training command. And you know, we had our wings, but that was about all we had. We didn't have any experience. You know, just young guys. I was a lieutenant junior grade and lieutenant JG, so I 300 hours or so, and they were sending me back to Pensacola to be a flight instructor, for goodness sake. So they put us through an instructor under training program, 2 weeks of flying, and with a well-qualified old hand kind of instructor with us to teach us what we're supposed to do in the T-28 as flight instructors. So most of the time it was the familiarization phase and the basic instrument phase is what we taught in training squadron number 2, Whiting Field. And so I got my first student flying, and you know, got moving along, and then I've only been in there on board for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks doing this. And I was flying maybe 3 or 4 sorties a day. They were 1.3 hours long. It's sort of, you have to brief, and you have to, of course, when you flew through the flight, you had to write a grade sheet after the flight and so forth. They threw us, you know, things like. We didn't have very much guidance in terms of what was the standard, what was average, what was above average, what was below. It's just how we felt that particular day. Yeah. A little after about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month and a half, I'd been on board and got a little bit more comfortable. I said, well, this is going pretty well. So I briefed the student one day, and then in the T-28, it was a propeller piston engine aircraft, right? Propeller aircraft, not a jet. And so to control the engine, you had 3 things. You had the throttle quadrant over in the left hand. It had the throttle. It had the prop control lever. And you had a mixture control lever that controlled the fuel going to the engine. And so the procedure was for takeoff was you had them all full forward so you get full power on the engine to take off, get airborne, and climb. So we climb up to altitude, and altitude was maybe 8 to 9,000 feet, something like that. Climb to that altitude, level off. And of course, when you level off, the students we briefed the student on all these procedures and so forth, and they practiced them in the only kind of simulator we had, just a box that basically wasn't very sophisticated. Anyways, the procedure was when you level off, push the nose over, and you start to accelerate to 170 knots in the T-28, and you pull the throttle back a certain manifold pressure, certain engine setting, and then reset the prop to a certain RPM, and then take the mixture control and you put the mixture in the middle, which is kind of normal. The full forward position was full rich, and the back position was idle cutoff. So I'm sitting there watching this all happen. He leveled off, the student leveled off, start to get accelerated, and then I see the throttle come back. My hand was kind of over the top of the throttle quadrant. So moving these levers because I had the throttle quadrant in the back seat. With the throttle back, with the prop set the prop controller set that, and then he grabbed the mixture control, slammed it all the way back to off idle cutoff. So shut down the engine. The engine quit. And, oh my God. Well, it scared the hell out of me. It didn't stop. I see the mixture control all the way back. So I took the mixture control and slammed it forward. Of course, when they did that, it's a big shot of fuel going to the engine and went bam down there, blew the calf flaps off the engine, and it didn't. It scared the hell out of me. And anyway, we went on with the rest of the hop and came back and I said to myself, I'm not going to let that happen to me ever again. That's really done. I got to figure something out here. My lieutenant junior grade brain is thinking about things that I could do to prevent that reoccurrence. So the very next day, different student, It was set up, climbed up, looked down. Throttle comes back to the throttle comes back, the prop control comes back, and then the mixture control comes back. He slams it back to idle cutoff, shuts the engine down again on that. Oh my God, this is bad news. I'm not sure. I'm unlucky or whatever. Next case, same thing, same different student, same thing. So I said, but before, I'm smarter than the average bear. I said, okay, I'm going to do something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my fingers down in that slot for the mixture control, so he won't be able to get the mixture control all the way back down the cutoff. We level off. He pulls the prop back, the throttle back, prop back, and then he brings the mixture back, slams it back, and that'll cut off. Smashes my two fingers. I pulled my fingers out of the slot. Oh, shut the engine down. Not a good story. But anyway, bam, again, he got the engine running again, but it never happened again until they used the pencil the next time.
That's horrible. Oh my gosh. So that was the fix, was a pencil.
The fix was the pencil.
Oh my goodness. What?
So
yeah.
I learned to fly in the P-28. That experience really taught me how to fly, looking after myself and looking after others. And another incident that stands out in my mind back that period of my career at Whiting Field, because it was a busy student field. You'd have to have a runway duty officer down there at the end of the runway to make sure the students, when all the airplanes came back, they had the landing gear down. If the landing gear went down, we had a flare gun and fire a flare at the guy, and didn't have a radio out there going to shoot a flare. So, and we took turns being the runway duty officer. But you had to go out there for a couple of hours or so and do that. So I'm sitting there, and the guy comes in and he's on the landing approach. He's got his landing gear up. So I took the flare pistol, fired the flare. He got his landing gear down. The flare went over to the midfield of the airport where we were flying. It was all really dry grass, so I set the whole airfield on fire. Fire trucks had to come racing out. Put the fire out.
Oh no. Oh my gosh. Did they get it out in time before it spread off the...
They got it out. They got it out. We burned quite a bit of grass there in the infield.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. I'm assuming they have a different method of letting people know if they're landing.
Sure, they changed. That was pretty primitive. It was a pretty primitive operation to think some of the things that we did.
You made do with what you had. That's like, I'm wondering what a simulator looked like at that time too, because I think about simulators. My dad developed a lot of simulation kinds of things in his post-Navy career, and
yeah,
I've seen that nascent development of things, and so I can't even imagine what a simulator was like, at Whiting Field back in the day, or just, it must have been a very different experience than today.
Yeah, very, very different. I mean, they were very rudimentary. They were basically just a folding chair in front of some stapled, images of instrument panels and switches and stuff. That was about all we had. That was very, very basic, rudimentary. Or you could go sit in the cockpit of an airplane if you wanted to, just kind of memorize where all the switches were and so forth. But anyway, there was another incident I want to tell you about that occurred to me. This is in VF-33 on America in the Gulf of Tonkin, and back then in the Vietnam War days. We were flying at we rotate day cycle, night cycle, and so forth. This was going on a night flight, and I had a night road record, and I had fully loaded airplane. Max gross weight of the F4 Phantom was something like 57,000 pounds or something like that. And had to know what the max weight was, what your weight was, so the capital officer could set the catapult for the appropriate weight to launch the airplane. So, and it was about 90 degrees, high humidity, so density altitude was pretty high. That means that you don't get the thrust that you really need, and the airplane doesn't fly quite as well at that. Those kinds of conditions, so things are not working at peak performance. But I went off on the waist catapult, and a friend of mine was sitting back aft and watching. He was in the Alert 5, is watching me launch. And so on launch in the F4 Phantom, you go run up to full power, you go mid power, and then the catapult officer would signal afterburn. So you select the afterburner. You need the afterburner to get airborne and to successfully, get through the transition and actually take off, gear up, flaps up, and flying out. So in the burner, and I checked the nozzles I knew I had good burn light on both engines, and saluted the catapult officer, turned my lights on at night, that's a signal you're ready to launch, and fired the catapult. Well, unbeknownst to me, during that catapult shot, one of the afterburners had blown out on one of the engines. And I wasn't looking at the engine gauges at all, because at that point of the launch process, you're looking at the attitude driver to make sure you rotate to the proper angle after the cat shot. Excuse me. So off we went, and later on, when I came back, my buddy said, I saw your airplane. There was a light on the top of the fuselage of the airplane back aft. It's called the turtleback light, the white light. And he said, I saw the turtleback light disappear below the flight deck level. The only thing I remember when it happened, so I didn't know the burner had gone out. This relates kind of similarly, but not entirely, to the mishap you talked about, when the burner blowout on a catapult shot in the F-14 contact, when we didn't know about the yaw that would be generated because of asymmetric thrust in the airplane. We didn't know that was going to have that kind of an effect. Not quite the same in the Phantom, of course, but because the engines are closer together and you can get airborne barely. But because of the conditions, the atmospheric conditions and so forth, the burner blown out, I settled off the cat shot. I didn't really know it, except for a split second. And in that split second, I looked up and I could see the catwalk alongside the flight deck of the airplane, of the ship above me. So I had settled significantly. It's about 60 or 70 feet above the water, I think, where the flight deck is. Maybe it's longer than that. I don't remember the exact dimensions. Anyway, so I had settled down below and got it airborne successfully. Once airborne, I realized that the burner had blown out. I checked the engine a few minutes after that, and everything was working properly. But for some reason, one of the burners had blown out. So it was a very close call for me. Probably as close as a call as I can remember ever having. You could have easily flown into the water. We were very close to flying into the water as it was. But had we a few feet lower, we would have certainly impacted the water. It's very lucky. So it's like I said, either luck, or whatever keeps you from having a mishap.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's what my dad described too when that happened in the F-14, and they dealt with it, and just being so settled low. He said when they looked at the plat footage, you couldn't see the jet. It had gone that low under the flight deck. And I imagine, was there plat footage at the time that you guys would review?
Video. I don't remember seeing the video later on after we came back. I don't remember seeing that, but it's the sensation of the realization that I was influenced.
Were you worried at that moment that something might happen, or did you just keep your head on and keep going and doing everything? Yeah.
Everything works. Okay, let's go do the mission.
Right. There's no time, I feel like, to worry, because you have so many other things to check through.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I guess we do have enough time. I'd love to ask you, we can move into kind of that next period, because I'm astonished at how many moments, I told you this before we started recording today, but how many cutting edge moments of naval aviation you've been on. And the next one that I think would be interesting to dive into is the Super CAG idea. And, it kind of, from what I've read, it ties in with that, what you talked about with Top Gun, where here are some things that we need to do to fix some issues that we've noticed with naval aviation. Top Gun dealt with part of it, but then there was this need for something to make things cohesive, I guess. I'd love you to talk about it, because I am not the one to talk about it, Bad Fred.
The Super CAG program is, they don't call it that anymore, nor do they even recognize where that phrase comes from and what it means. Of course, that doesn't matter. any of that doesn't matter anymore anyway. But there is a history involved in the whole episode, and historically, historic perspective, some things that happened in naval aviation that were not did not have the desired results, the desired impact, or didn't have the success that was required of submission that had occurred. And we had a situation set up with the leadership of the Navy. The most senior leadership, of course, was the Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Navy was a really dynamic guy. He was controversial, but nobody could fault his intellect or his desire to make the Navy better, bigger and better, and his, in particular, support naval aviation, naval aviation bigger and better. And that's his name is John Layman. I don't hesitate saying his name. He was probably our most dynamic and most effective Secretary of the Navy we've ever had. Fantastic person, very controversial, as I said. However, anyway, sometimes you got to break some eggs to make an omelet, and he broke a lot of eggs. So, and the omelet came out to be pretty good, to tell you the truth. So, anyway, so what had occurred was that I think that some mistakes that had been occurring in the fleet involving carriers and carrier aircraft. One of which, the pinnacle, I think the thing that broke the canvas back was the planned strike into Syria as a result of the Marine Corps, the bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon during that period of time. And we had the USS Independence was stationed there in the Eastern Mediterranean. And the planners and the senior leadership in the theater wanted to do something to counter what occurred in the Marine barracks bombing. So they decided that let's take a look, let's make some plans about some place that we could strike in Syria to show people that we are going to retaliate if we kill Americans as they had done. So that ship and the air wing were tasked to develop a strike package, a strike plan to go into Lebanon to a significant target and drop bombs on this target. They worked out the plan, and I think it was kind of on again, off again sort of thing. They're kind of ready to do it at one point, and not ready to do it, and they can't do it, and so forth. But they decided to make it happen. So somebody in the chain of command, to this day, nobody knows really who it was. Somebody in the chain of command authorized them to launch on this particular day, in the morning hours, in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it was that time of year where I think it was in the late fall when this thing occurred, but it's the time of year when that particular part of the Med it's very hazy, visibility is restricted by a lot of haze, and so it's difficult. There's usually no horizon to see, distinct horizons for flying in your instruments. So they decided to launch, and they launched a strike package, and the strike package went inbound, and the sun was rising, and they're looking to the east. They're going from west to east. The sun coming up, the haze, they were just basically, they couldn't see anything. So and they went into the target area, and totally ineffective. Didn't do anything at all really in terms of damage to the target. And we, however, in the naval aviation, lost two airplanes. One of which was an A6, wherein the pilot was killed and the bombardier navigator ejected successfully and was captured by the Syrians and held by them. The other airplane was an A7 that got shot down by a shoulder-launched infrared anti-aircraft missile, infrared seeking. It's called an SA-7. Anyway, hit him with a shoulder-mounted IR seeker weapon. And destroyed the airplane. The pilot ejected. He came down in the water off the coast close to the shoreline of Lebanon, Beirut, as a matter of fact. A couple of fishermen picked him up, took him back into the beach, and turned him over to the authorities there, and they took him down into I guess there was a hospital there in the soccer stadium. that's where he was. And somehow or other, I don't remember the details, but he was later, not very long afterwards, he was picked up by our forces and returned to the ship. And that person was the Air Wing commander. The Air Wing commander got shot down. And they went back to reconstruct it all. And it turns out the whole episode, the whole planning process, the decision to execute the mission, launch the aircraft, and go for that target was terribly obscured by the situation as developed. It was a horrible mistake, basically. So with those results, it was decided that was sort of the tipping point wherein it's like something needed to be done. One of which was to stand up something called Strike Warfare Center up at Fallon, Nevada. To stand that up, to train aircrews better in strike planning, mission awareness, mission familiarization, mission knowledge, weapons knowledge, and so forth. And today it's still running, going like gangbusters and doing a fantastic job at Fallon Strike Warfare Center. The other piece of it was to stand up a change to the leadership chain of command in their strike forces. Previously, the Air Wing commander had been his boss on the ship was the carrier's commanding officer. So he reported, he was just like a department head on the ship, like the engineering department, supply department, engineering, those kind of operations department. He was co-equal with those guys, those billets. And the CEO of the ship wrote his fitness report. He decided that the Air Wing commander needed to be better trained, be more senior, and have a different reporting chain of command. And the chain of command that was devised was from the Air Wing commander would now work not for the ship's CO, but for the admiral aboard the ship. The CO of the ship report directly to the admiral, and now the Air Wing commander reported directly to the admiral. Different chain of command entirely. Different situation as well. The guy is more senior and better trained, and should be better trained and better prepared to take on these kinds of missions. Make sure that they're effective and they work. They hadn't been working. So John Lehman decided to stand up this thing called the Super CAG program. Take some more senior officers, train them up better prepare them for the job, give them the tools that they needed in order to do a better job, and let's see how things work. So what he designed, and his staff designed was a chain of command wherein, as I described, the Super CAG goes directly to the flag. That senior CAG has better training, but they didn't have a training pipeline to launch yet. They knew they wanted this kind of structure and so forth. Now they had to pick the people to fill those billets. Once again, for some reason in my career, I seem to step in front of the train from time to time, and I happened to be positioned between the railroad tracks, and I was the first guy picked to be the first Super CAG. Well, there are two of us really, me and another guy named Ron Zlatiker, who later became a 4-star and retired as a SINCPAC fleet. Really a great pilot, great leader, good guy. He went to the West Coast and his staff was changed, so he had a deputy, and my staff was the same as his. I had a deputy, and then he and I devised a training pipeline that the Super CAG should go through, and we spent a lot of time working out where and when a Super CAG should go, what intelligence agencies he need to be plugged into, how do you get plugged into them, how do you get the data, the information, the intel information you need to do your job appropriately. So we did that. We worked on that for about 6 months, and then we took. I was the first one to take command again. CAG 8, same CAG I had commanded as a commander, and that's how the life began as a Super CAG with a deputy. Before that, however, at least I made one other remark. I was when this all happened, when this all went down, I was en route to command, get my deep draft command. It was going to be USS Iwo Jima. And to go to your command, it was a PCO's, Prospective Commanding Officers training pipeline you got to go through. You had to go through specific engineering, navigation and operational kind of training to get you up to speed on surface warfare and what's required of you as a commanding officer of a surface ship. Excuse me. So I was pretty much through that whole pipeline. When I got the word that I was going to be the first Super CAG, I was located at the time on another ship of the same class that I was going to command down off of Morehead City in South Carolina. A friend of mine was commanding officer, and I heeled out there to his ship the day before, take a look at how things ran on his ship, because mine was going to be an identical ship, so that's the reason I wanted to do that. So we're on the ship, and then I was on his ship, and he got a call on the satellite phone, and he answered it. He said, "That is Fred Lewis there. We want to talk to him." So yes, he is. So hand me the satellite phone. These are verbal orders. You are to detach from where you are right now, detach from what you're doing, report immediately to OpNav and Pentagon tomorrow. That's as immediate as I can get it. And report to Admiral, forget his name. He was the head of Naval Aviation. Report to his office at such and such a time, and for your follow on assignment. Of course, this is all mystery to me. So, you sure you got the right guy? I'm out here, and I said, you hear me clearly. So I heeled back off of his ship back to the beach, got my car, drove north, went to Washington D.C. almost immediately. Went into the Three Stars office and said, "This is what you guys." And Zlatterper was there also. He had been on duty in the Pentagon, so he didn't have to travel to So we said, "This is what you're going to do. You're going to do. This is generally what it is, but you're going to go down here in about 5 minutes." And we said, "We're going to sit down with the Secretary of the Navy, and he's going to tell you what you want." Okay. So we waited for 5 minutes, walked on down to the SecNav's office, went in there, and just John Lehman, Ron Zlatterper, and me. And said, "This is what I want you guys to do." He went through this whole litany of the organizational structure change, training pipeline change. So now, after about an hour of discussion with him, he said, any further questions? And we both said no. Go do it. Out we went, orders in hand. We marched right down to the Naval Aviation offices in the Pentagon. Sat down at a whiteboard, said, "This is what our pipeline will be." We worked on that for quite a while, trying to put the package together. And then we all both embarked on our separate ways. He went to the West Coast, I went to the East Coast. We said the Nimitz and CAG, and that's how the Super CAG program began. It sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but it was not. Most particularly because when they make a change that significant to an organization, it causes perturbations and tsunamis that occur throughout the system. And those who are picked to do those kinds of jobs, they got to have a tough skin, because people aren't going to like you very much for a while. And that came across loud and clear to both of us as we started to stand up this whole thing. Other thing that was a kind of a sidebar rationale for this program is that at that time we still had a number of conventionally powered aircraft carriers. Conventionally powered aircraft carriers could be commanded by guys who were selected for it, but they had a deep draft command, and then to a carrier. Then we had a few nuclear powered aircraft carriers, but the nuclear power guys had to go to a year-long school on nuclear power. Rightfully so. It's a very tough program, very difficult. They had to know everything they could learn about their engineering plan on the nuclear powered aircraft carrier, because the sensitivities of nuclear powers, they existed then and exist today. So, and the nuclear power guys were usually, basically what Lehman wanted was to have another pipeline from which you could select admirals, maybe admirals. And he didn't want, and normally naval aviation admirals came from the carrier fleet. Guys had command aircraft carriers. Excuse me. And because of the time required to be a nuke, it slowed the process down. So you had fewer Navy captains who were senior enough to be selected for admiral. So he wanted to broaden that base. So to broaden the base, what he did is the Super CAG program filled that need. So as a Super CAG, you finish the tour and you are immediately available for selection to fly. You're senior enough now. You had a major command, and you check all the blocks, and you're now able to be looked at for promotion to flying. So we've had a number of Super CAGs who've been promoted to flying. Maeve, for example, and also Ron's Ladder, right? The first two, and then quite a number of them over time now have been selected to fly rank. So all what I just told you is totally transparent to everybody today. They have no idea that that's what happened in the past, except for those who went through it and had an experience. So a major milestone in my career, changed our life, of course. But again, I was on the cusp of something new again, something new that happened, some new programs, some new events, some new airplanes, some new this or that, some new somebody's dream of how an organization might change, or the system might change, or the platform might change. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time to be in between the railroad tracks and smack with it.